to you, they shake your hand and ask you your name and where you're coming from. You follow them into a huge auditorium that is already full of students. Your orientation leader hands you a detailed itinerary for your 2-day overnight orientation. They tell you you will need to find your group based on the information on your itinerary. The leader also explains that once everyone finds their group, get ready to participate in the first activity together. But don't worry, they say, it's going to be really fun and easy. It's called Your Side. Your team leader will call out a scenario to your group and you need to run to the side of the room. That's your answer. So let's say the scenarios, have you taken a picture with Mickey Mouse at Disney World? If you have, you will run to that side of the room, and if not, you just stay where you are. They welcome you again and bustle away to the next incoming student. Okay, so I'm gonna have everyone open their eyes. And now just kind of refocusing the shift of that interaction. The idea is now envisioning what this would be like for a student that has a physical disability. So let's say a student that maybe is in a wheelchair. Maybe 3 responses of what may be challenging for that student to come into this orientation. Yes?
If you're in an auditorium, they would have you all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Yes.
I think they would feel very singled out and like they're on the spot.
Mm-hmm. One more.
It would be kind of scary or uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, you may know where we're going with this, but now reshifting that as well to an international student who English is their second language. How would this orientation be challenging for them?
Direction might be difficult, and
Mm-hmm.
Like it could be sensory overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to just adapt to the campus culture as well as the United States
Yeah.
culture.
What about as a single parent?
you could be worried like how long it's going to take, and you could that daycare.
It's a 2-day overnight orientation. So, and then our last example is a veteran. How could this maybe be a challenging environment or orientation for them?
A bunch of like young, eager, screaming, running around like kids.
Mhm.
It might seem childish.
Yeah. And Justine?
Well, to go on that, most likely your orientation leader is probably could potentially be younger than you. I work in it, and they're all sophomores.
Yeah.
If the orientation leaders weren't trained, them assuming that they're like a dad or a mom of
Mhm.
the college students.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think too, how we talked about before, just like if there's not the specific directions and like that's what you're used to, and then all of a sudden it's do it on your own, that sense of where do I go, where do I belong?
Yeah, and so these are all just really great points. Another one also is what they talk about is with veterans too, is often they cannot necessarily be put in a place where they can't see everyone around them, and just all of this activity and running around, and that could be a really scary place for them. So things to just take into account. So just a brief showing of hands, who had an orientation in their undergrad experience? Okay, so it's like everyone. Who vividly remembers their orientation? Okay, a couple less. And who feels that their orientation fully prepared them for their experience? Even less. Okay. So jumping in, so just kind of keep some of these points in mind as we talk through this functional area. What is student orientation and first-year programming or experience? It's tricky because there is no universal definition for what this is. There's no one-size-fits-all. It is not just games and icebreakers, so this is a big quote. What we found is what is universal, though, is its purpose. And essentially the bottom line is for retention. They want students to experience a smooth and successful transition into their college experience. And one of the tools is the W curve. And this starts out up here. This is the honeymoon period. So this is probably us when we first came here. We're like, woo, we're student affairs. leaders, and we're so excited to jump into this coursework. We're all meeting each other. Maybe we're more down here now, which is shock. What am I doing here? Oh my gosh, I have all these papers due, these projects. Maybe I don't like everyone as much as I thought I did. My roommate's giving me problems. Then you go up into the initial adjustment period. Maybe you're starting to feel a little bit like more things are handled. You're starting to get more involved in the community. Back down again to mental isolation. This is where you're kind of feeling torn between your home and now what your new community is. And the idea is we want students to get back up here, which is the acceptance and integration. So first year experience professionals can use this as a tool to remember these are big points of possible student dropout and where they need some additional support from staff. So I'll let Kate go.
Okay, so now you have a basic overview of the field of what we're talking to you guys about today. I'm going to give you a little background on the history. There's not really a rich history of orientation. It seems very prevalent in our educational facilities today, but it hasn't been around in its form currently for very long. The first orientation process was cited as being at Harvard in the 19th century, so 1800s, for those of you who aren't history majors like myself. So 1800s, fast forward a 1,000 years, and in the 1960s, 70s, there was kind of a revolution. University 101 became a thing, and students started kind of going to administrators and asking for a more comprehensive. Harvard's program had just been a few older students meeting with younger students, and that was about it. By the 1960s and 70s, with all the riots and protests on campus, we needed to start forming communities within our educational facilities. So the idea of a seminar or an orientation class that met for a long time and really got you involved in all the different activities and possibilities of campus, creating a transitional space and helping you in that move to this whole new world that is college became much more prevalent. Today, like Corinne was saying, there is no one size fits all, and there can be a lot of improvement in that kind of mindset as well. There's a whole slew of programs that we have today offered to students, and on the back of your front page of your handout, you can see them listed out for you with some key bullet points. They kind of come in 3 or 4 different little clumps. Orientation programs and summer bridge programs can kind of be clumped together. Those are what we traditionally think of when we say the words orientation. It's a shorter, condensed program, but very hard-hitting, meant to give you all of the main points of what you need to know to do college in a much condensed form. The summer bridge program would just be done over the summer as a transitional period to get you to that first day of college. There's also living and regular learning communities. That's much more of a throughout the year thing. A lot of you probably have had, can I see a show of hands, what undergrad universities have living and learning communities? It's becoming much more prevalent. That's a very great way for colleges to stay in touch with their students academically over the course of their time, as well as, especially with the living learning community, you're studying the same things, you're living in the same place, it's a network, you're creating that community that was so important back in the 1960s when this idea really started coming about. Lastly, first year seminars, freshman seminars. Anything with the word seminar generally means that it's offered for credit or it's a course-like format. So overall, those are going to be much more, weekly meetings or monthly meetings or something along those lines, really touching base with students fairly often and helping them on a whole broad spectrum of subjects. Those can cover everything from library orientation to, how to buy your books on campus. Comprehensive support programs can be just about anything from TRIO to veterans, like veteran-specific services or other specific services for transfer students, things along those lines. When you're looking at this page, keep in mind there isn't very much diversity. We need to continue to keep these points that we were talking about in our head as we go forward and talk about this. and work to develop this area.
So our informational interviews, we try to be very intentional about looking at different types of institutions. So we have the big U of M, the big research. We have on public, we have a private online, National American University. We have the private residential religious St. Kate's, and then we have the Tribal Community College.
Fond du Lac Tribal Community College.
And we did that because orientation is just so broad that just kind of learning about there is no one way, which can be a challenge, but also create opportunity for people in this area field to be creative and really to bring this awareness about what are some of the students that are not being served in the orientations, and then how you can develop. So I think it's a cool field in that sense where there's no strict guidelines necessarily. I mean, we do have the CAS assessment guidelines that they want you to incorporate into the orientation, but otherwise it's pretty flexible in that. So just an example, U of M, when I went there, she is with Beth, she's the director, and they have their own office, and it's beautiful. And she gave me this packet that has like 100 pages in here, talking all about, they have programs on dealing with families and how they have family orientations, and they have packets on transfer students, international students. They have, it's not just a day long, they also offer a week-long orientation and then a full year experience, which is just an extended orientation where they just kind of touch base with the students throughout the year and have different activities. And I mean, I couldn't believe how much information that they have. Then we go to the National American University, which is online, and the woman Tierney, that I interviewed with, she's a second year, and she worked there last year. And doing an orientation for online programming, as you can imagine, is very challenging. It's how do you get the students engaged? A lot of the students that they work with are older, so they don't have the time to come for a full day or a 2-day orientation. They have families and work, so they need to make it effective and impactful in a very short period of time. And coming up with ways to engage them online, but also part of her job is that she was under the advising services. So each person would be assigned students, and it was their job to do like a personal over the phone orientation with them, and then follow them throughout their college experience. So it became more of a personal responsibility that their students would graduate.
Within St. Kate's, it was very similar to the U of M, but not as many resources. They are a smaller institution, they are privatized, so their funding comes from different places. And I wasn't actually able to take with me any of the information because they only made enough copies for the students who needed to have it at orientation, just because budgeting was different there. They don't make, giant packets that they can hand out to whoever. But they do have different orientations. They are trying to do that customization that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. They had a different orientation program for transfer students. They have a different one for ESL. They have a different one for first year, and then they have one for grad students. So they're trying. There's definitely room for improvement still, but they are definitely moving in that direction. And then lastly, and sadly, the least amount of information came from Fond du Lac. Unfortunately, their budget does not allow for hardly anything. Since they are a tribal institution, they have just about zero funding for anything because it's all pretty much donation-based, some federal grants and whatnot. But they have a welcome week. They do their best. I talked to the Dean of Student Services, and this falls under that. There's no office for orientation. There's no office for Welcome Week. There's not an office for much besides the Dean of Student Services, so that was who I had to talk to. But they do try. So I guess within this, just wrapping it up, bringing this back to closure.
And just real quick, I wanted to point something out too. The job titles, we did show an example of just different job titles. So if you are interested in looking at a position in this field, think outside of the box. It's not always just going to be a Google search on first year experience coordinator or new student orientation. So it will behoove you to do a little more research into the different structures of the institutions and then how student orientation